Quick question. Why does a riff from 1965 still make stadiums shake in 2025? Before arena pop, before billion-dollar tours, before the word iconic got worn out, there were the Rolling Stones. They didn't just make songs, they rewired how rock moves, the swagger, the stage, the business behind the roar. But behind the legend is a cost almost nobody talks about. Friendships burned, lines crossed, nights that changed music forever, and nearly ended it. Stay with me. In the next few minutes, we're not counting hits. We're tracing the fuse that redefined what a band could be. Start with a sound, a busted fuzz guitar and a restless lyric. I can't get no satisfaction. That riff didn't just top charts. It taught a generation that a guitar line could carry a song like a headline. The Stones made the riff a weapon, attitude a chorus, and risk the business model. While everyone smiled for the cameras, they leaned into danger. Blues grit, noir humor, and a groove you felt in your bones. Would you let your daughter marry a Rolling Stone? That was the pitch, and the provocation. But the same force that made them untouchable would push them to the edge. How do you grow bigger than the room without blowing the room up? They didn't just tour, they invented touring as a global machine. Trucks, screens, sponsorships, a moving city that landed, roared, and vanished by dawn. Arena rock as we know it? That template has a tongue-and-lips logo stamped across it. And yet, for every night that felt immortal, there was a night that felt like a warning. Altamont, a free concert meant to cap a decade, and a mirror showing how quickly the dream could crack. From that chaos came rules, security, a new kind of order. The industry changed because it had to. So here's the riddle. How do you stay the world's most dangerous band and still survive the world you built? Decade after decade, they shed skins and kept the core. Open G riffs, loose but tight grooves, a frontman who turned a stage into a sport. Punk sneered at them, then borrowed their engine. Glam stole the shine. Indie kept the swing. Even now, the latest records prove the meter's still running. Not nostalgia, momentum. But the real story isn't just how the Stones changed music, it's how they changed what a band is allowed to be. Brand, empire, myth, and still a bar band at heart. So how did a crew of blues obsessives become the blueprint for modern stardom? And what did it cost along the way? Let's roll it back to where the fuse was lit. The tiny rooms, the records that raised them, and the choice that set them apart. In 1962, London, most radio felt safe. Polite pop, novelty hits, tidy dance bands on the BBC. Behind closed doors, young working-class kids were hungry for something with teeth. Clubs got raided, gatekeepers kept the mic tight, and American rhythm and blues records were scarce and expensive. The Rolling Stones didn't fall out of a label meeting. They were built in basement clubs, backline loans, and all-nighters, where the air tasted like sweat and valves. By the time anyone knew the name, the parts were already dangerous. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town. The Ealing Jazz Club is packed. Alexis Corner's Blues Incorporated is pushing a Chicago sound through British amps not quite built for it. A tall blonde kid from Cheltenham, Brian Jones, shows up with a slide guitar obsession and the nerve to sit in. Two Dartford schoolmates, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, drift in with Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry carved into their heads. Pianist Ian Stewart, older, stone-steady, anchors the chords like a freight train. On the back line, cheap amps, and borrowed gear. On the dance floor, kids who don't want to be crooned to, they want to be rattled. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the pressure. Post-war Britain still lives with ration-era habits, class ceilings, and a stiff upper lip. The BBC's Light program gives you what's wholesome. If you want the other thing, the growl, the grit, you find it in tiny rooms where the band is an arm's length away and the snare drum is practically a second heartbeat. That's the world the Stones were born into. Not a market, but a craving. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Before the fame, the Stones are a collection of separate engines. Brian Jones, restless and laser-focused, curates the band like a blues archivist with bite. He hears Elmore James in his head and turns slide guitar into a siren. Mick Jagger, all instinct and calculation, is a blues shouter in a modern body. He studies Howlin' Wolf's presence, then bends it toward theater. Keith Richards, rhythm fanatic, worships Chuck Berry's right hand. He's not chasing filigree, he's hunting the groove that makes bodies move. Ian Stewart, the adult in the room, plays boogie-woogie with iron timing and runs the logistics when no one else can. Charlie Watts, who steps in by early '63, comes from jazz. He doesn't smash, he places. He leaves space like a dancer, which is why the band can breathe while still sounding dangerous. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, a promoter on the phone wants an act called The Rollin' Stones for the Marquee Club, and the name comes straight off a Muddy Waters record sleeve. The first gig, July 12, 1962, feels less like a debut and more like a jailbreak. The set list? American Black Blues, translated by British kids who play it too loud, too raw, and somehow just right. Hold that sound in your head. Now add a plan. Residencies sharpen teeth. At the Crawdaddy Club in Richmond, the Stones learn to turn a room into a weapon. They stretch grooves, sucker punch with stop time, and watch the crowd like hunters. This is the DIY grind before anyone at a label cares. Hauling amps on the tube, begging for rehearsal time, living on chips and tea. They aren't writing the future yet. They're mastering the feel that will make the future land. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. The Beatles are exploding as clean, witty heartbreakers. The Stones decide to be the antidote. Enter Andrew Loog Oldham, a young manager with sharper elbows than experience. He sees not just a band, but a brand. He cuts Ian Stewart from the photos to streamline the look. Stu keeps playing piano and running the van. He tells the others, stop smiling. Lean into menace. Then he floats the question heard round the tabloids. Would you let your daughter marry a Rolling Stone? And hands the public its favorite moral panic. The band signs to Decca after a well-timed tip from George Harrison. The fuse is lit. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town. On UK radio, R&B is still a guest. On stage, it's the landlord. The Stones are making the case that this music, born in Black American communities, is not a museum piece, but a living, sweating force. They borrow with reverence and volume, turning Jimmy Reed into dance, turning Muddy's electricity into a British storm. It's imitation as education at first, then transformation. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the first break in the weather. 1963 brings a debut single, Chuck Berry's Come On, and it's modest. But the live show is not modest. The rooms boil, the clothes get sharper, the stance grows wider. The media learns, do not ask them to behave. By the time Charlie Watts sits in for good, the engine locks into place. You get that feel, the slightly behind-the-beat snare, Keith's chug, Brian's glassy slide, Mick's harmonica cutting the air. The band stops sounding like a set list and starts sounding like a threat. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. What makes them instantly feel different isn't just attitude. It's the arrangement of force. Jagger commands the front, but he's really dancing over a drum and rhythm engine that refuses to hurry. Richards aims at the hips, not the high notes. Jones decorates with danger, harmonica that bites, slide that screams. Watts and Stewart keep it standing when the front line goes feral. This isn't chaos, it's choreography that looks like chaos. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, a new youth tribe is forming. Sharper hair, harder stare, less patience. Mods and rockers will soon be fighting on beaches. In clubs like the Marquee, a different war is happening, between safe pop and the blues. The Stones carry the banner for the latter, and the kids choose sides with their feet. Hold that sound in your head. Now add one missing ingredient: authorship. Covers can ignite a room, but to change a decade, you have to write its nerve endings. Oldham nudges Jagger and Richards to become a songwriting team. Close the door. Don't come out without something to sing. The first good songs come slow, then flood. A new idea takes shape. The guitar riff as the song's identity. A headline you can hum in 3 seconds. A hook with teeth. It's not here yet, not fully, but the room is primed. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. By late '64, the Stones have 2 parallel reputations: the dirtiest live band in Britain and a gang you're warned about in newspapers. That tension, ecstatic music, moral panic, will be their power source. And it's about to collide with one invention that will vault them from rooms to continents, a riff that will not let go, a sleepless night, a cassette recorder, and a fuzz box you could buy in a shop. The moment a 5-note idea turns into a cultural earthquake. In the next chapter, we watch Jagger Richards stop imitating their heroes and start writing the rules, one riff at a time. After a long, sleepless night on tour in America, Keith Richards wakes up to a cassette, where he's recorded himself half asleep. A few bars of a guitar idea, then 40 minutes of snoring. Freeze the frame. Listen to that hook one more time. 5 notes, raw and nagging. Now add a cheap fuzz box, crank the amp, and point it straight at the radio. In 1965, I Can't Get No Satisfaction doesn't just arrive, it detonates. The room tilts. The first time they play it live, people stop talking. It doesn't sound like a new act, it sounds like a weapon. The kids hear the future. The papers hear a problem. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, pirate radio is beaming outlaw R&B into British bedrooms. Club kids are trading singles like passports. The Stones, who started as devoted students of American blues, suddenly own a new lane, attitude you can hum. That riff becomes a headline, the lyric a dare, and the groove a marching order. It's not pretty, it's undeniable. Hold that sound in your head. Now add authorship. Oldham locks Mick and Keith in rooms with a piano and says, "Don't come out without a song." The partnership snaps into focus. The flood begins. The last time, then satisfaction, then a run that feels like a takeover. The idea changes from "we can play this music" to "we can define this music." Jagger writes from the street up, lust, frustration, a sideways grin. Richards writes for the hips first, the hook second, and the shock last. Together, they build a new rule. The guitar riff is the song's identity. You can whistle it before you know the words. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Paint It Black, 1966. Brian Jones picks up a sitar and turns grief into a marching trance. The drum drives like a funeral with a motor. Under My Thumb, marimba, sneer, and control games. Mother's Little Helper, suburban medicine cabinet set to a jangle. This is the first shockwave. The singles aren't just hits, they're angles. Every release tweaks the sound and the nerve it pokes. And then the backlash lands. Too loud, too lewd, too American, not real blues. Pick your headline. Critics grumble, parents panic, promoters love the lines around the block. The Stones lean into the storm. They show up on pristine TV stages and refuse to be domesticated. They don't tidy the edges, they sharpen them. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, the Beatles are expanding pop's ceiling with color and arrangement. The Stones push the floorboards from below. Darker humor, dirtier grooves, and a frontman who treats the stage like a boxing ring. 2 lanes, same motorway. Both changing what songs are allowed to do. Hold that sound in your head. Now add a longer canvas. Aftermath, 1966, is the pivot. An album packed with Jagger, Richards originals. The band stops being a great singles machine and starts being a world you can walk through. Sarcasm, jealousy, swagger, and a rhythm section that never hurries. Brian Jones, restless as ever, paints the corners with dulcimer, marimba, sitar, colors you didn't expect on a blues chassis. It's not just more songs, it's a wider palette. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. What truly lifts them off isn't shock, it's feel control. Charlie Watts places the snare a hair behind the beat, and suddenly everything breathes. Keith locks the guitars like gears. Mick rides the pocket, part preacher, part street reporter. Ian Stewart, out of the photos, still in the engine room, keeps the boogie honest. The danger sells, but the time feel keeps you. Freeze the frame. Listen to the room getting darker. Beggar's Banquet, 1968, opens with Sympathy for the Devil, a samba that turns journalism into ritual. Street Fighting Man bottlenecks unrest into a parade drum. The utopian 60s have a mirror now, and it's cracked. Then Let It Bleed, 1969. Gimme Shelter brings the chill, the storm siren, the howl, the sense that the decade itself is listing. You Can't Always Get What You Want sounds like surrender sung as wisdom. The band is no longer chasing the culture. It's scoring the culture's hangover. Numbers don't tell it. This stage does. The 1969 U.S. tour is a new level of force. Bigger rooms, harder sound, a band that moves like one body. The tagline, "The greatest rock and roll band in the world," stops sounding like hype and starts feeling like weather. But that weather has lightning. Altamont turns a victory lap into a caution sign. The kids are still with them. The papers sharpen their knives. The Stones push on, tightening the machine. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the secret tool. Keith trades standard tuning for open G, and the grooves start to swagger differently. Chords become shapes you can swing. Riffs stop being lines and start being rooms you can live in. This is the DNA that will power Brown Sugar, Tumbling Dice, the country soul lean of the next era. And then the emblem arrives. Sticky Fingers, 1971, isn't just songs. It's the zipper cover, the tongue and lips sigil, the adult themes with no chaperone, the Rolling Stones Records label, an identity you can spot from across a stadium. The music is loose but surgical. Memphis horns, country dust, and a blues heart that still beats like trouble. After Satisfaction, the room tilted. That line keeps echoing because the tilt never really stopped. The first spark, riff plus fuzz plus nerve, becomes a full detonation. Singles that rewire radio, albums that map the darker streets of the decade, a live show that grows teeth. Fans get it in their bones. Critics fight it on the page. But by 1971, the Stones aren't arguing anymore. They're writing the rules everyone else is trying to bend. If liftoff is riff and attitude, empire is feel and endurance. How do you take this engine into exile? Build a sound that rolls like a bar band and a freight train at the same time, and come back with a record band's still chase. In the next chapter, we walk into the villa, the mobile studio, and the myth, where looseness becomes a masterpiece and survival becomes style. They weren't just selling music, they were selling permission. The Rolling Stones gave kids a uniform, an attitude, a way to be loud in public. Tight jackets, scarves, second-hand glamour, and that walk that said, "We answer to rhythm, not rules." Parents complained, kids copied. But strip the tabloids away and the secret weapon is the engine. Charlie's behind-the-beat glide, Keith's open G bite, Brian, and then Mick Taylor's color at the edges, Bill Wyman's bass that refuses to shout yet never lets go, and a vocal that smiles while it stings. Pull Charlie or Keith out, and the whole machine tilts. Quick nudge, solo the drums in your head. Hear the hi-hat? Charlie doesn't slam it, he places it, often lifting his stick on the backbeat so the snare cracks with air. That tiny gesture creates swing. It's why the Stones can sound loose and still land like clockwork. Copycats get the chords right and still miss the dance in the drums. The Myth engine lights up in the mid-60s. They're booked on Prim TV, but they won't behave. On one famous night, Mick changes "Let's spend the night together" to "Let's spend some time together," and still smirks the word through. Safe for broadcast, dangerous to anyone listening closely. Soon there are raids, headlines, whispered rumors. The press draws horns on them. The band wears the costume. Then comes an image you can spot from a football field away. The tongue and lips sigil. Youthful, irreverent, impossible to ignore. A logo as attitude. Freeze the frame. Listen to the guitar. Keith's conversion to 5-string open G reshapes the vocabulary. Chords become grips you can punch. Riffs become rooms you can live in. On Brown Sugar, Tumbling Dice, Start Me Up. The guitar isn't filigree, it's architecture. He aims for groove first, surprise second, perfection never. The result is human swing you can't quantize. Culture shock rolls downhill. The slang gets saltier. The clothes get leaner. Dance floors drop from jive to grind. Radio formats bend to the new weather. What once felt too American or too raw becomes the standard. Zine covers and tabloid fronts sell the danger. Teenagers buy the records and the pose. This is the blueprint for rock stardom as identity. Music, look, story, scandal. Packaged and projected at stadium scale. One studio trick you can't unhear after this: bleed. They let instruments talk to each other through the room. Overheads catching cymbal wash, guitar leaking into vocal mics, piano shimmering in drum mics. Engineers like Glyn Johns use minimal miking that respects space. Producer Jimmy Miller pushes takes until the band locks into that rolling pocket. Listen to Gimme Shelter. The drum kit isn't isolated, it breathes. When Mary Clayton's voice cracks on the high note, you hear history and the room. And then the backlash lands. Too loud, too lewd, not real blues. The Stones answer with craft. Paint it Black introduces sitar not as a stunt, but as a drone that turns grief into forward motion. Street Fighting Man starts from acoustic guitars recorded hot and primitive, then built into a marching clang, folk instruments bent into riot sound. Sympathy for the Devil takes a samba pulse and stacks menace over congas and claps. The groove smiles while the lyric sharpens the knife. Solo the bass, hear the logic. Bill Wyman doesn't crowd the middle. He slides into pockets the guitars leave open, often lagging a fraction behind the kick to deepen the sway. He's glue, not glitter. When he does step out, small runs, little nudges, you feel the floor tilt without the walls collapsing. That restraint is why the choruses explode. The controversy keeps feeding the culture. Bands and beefs become free marketing. They show up in tailored chaos, fur, velvet, eyeliner, and prove a band can be both elegant and feral. Anita Pallenberg's presence, Brian Jones's mercurial style, mix feline control. The camera can't look away. Teenagers learn a new social rule from the Stones. Cool isn't clean, it's committed. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Play it in your head. Jumpin' Jack Flash. The riff is a fist. The verse is a sneer. The chorus is a door kicked open. The lyric voice is plain-spoken and crooked at once. Tabloid on the surface, scripture under the skin. Jagger doesn't belt, he aims. He uses consonants like weapons and vowels like smoke. That's why lines sit in your mouth for decades. The craft isn't just in the band, it's in the frame around the band. Album art becomes theater. A cover with a working zipper. The tongue logo stamped on amps and tickets, typography that telegraphs mischief. The myth is designed, not accidental. But it stands because the songs can carry the weight. Here's why copycats never quite felt right. Most bands chase sound. The Stones chase feel. Sound is the note you play. Feel is when and why you play it. The hi-hat that breathes. The riff that's one note too simple and therefore unforgettable. The vocal that suggests more than it says. The piano, Ian Stewart, Nicky Hopkins, later Billy Preston, slipping gospel into rock so you dance before you notice. The sax, Bobby Keys, that doesn't solo so much as swagger. Remove any one of those pieces, and you hear the whole structure wobble. The culture absorbs them even as it tries to repel them. Parents complain. Kids buy boots, cut their hair into jagged intention, and practice that bored royal stare in the mirror. Clubs loosen their booking rules. Radio loosens its heart rate. The Stones prove you can be both a bar band and a global brand, if your time feel is undeniable and your story refuses to end. Image and controversy got them the spotlight. Craft kept them there. But empires are tested at scale. Can a band that runs on human swing survive tax exile, shifting lineups, and the grind of being the world's biggest moving target, and still walk into a villa with a mobile studio and come out with a record other bands chase for 50 years? Next, the villa, the tapes, the looseness that becomes a masterpiece. Behind the posters was a price tag. Sleep, blood, sanity. The Rolling Stones built a machine that could circle the world, and then discovered what it costs to stay inside it. We're going to sit with this for a second. The grind math is brutal. By the late 60s, they're crisscrossing continents, flying city to city on no real sleep, wedged between studio deadlines and court dates. Labels want singles, tours want more dates, promoters want bigger rooms, lawyers pack the dressing rooms, Managers track currency controls and tax brackets because the band's money bleeds every time a government changes the rules. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, the newspapers aren't writing about chords. They're writing about character. Raids, busts, stings, some fair, some theatrical. The Redlands drug bust, 1967, turns private chaos into national theater. Censorship games on TV change this lyric, soften this line, become ritual. The headline machine keeps humming, but the band's circle gets tighter. Friends become liabilities. Rooms feel wired. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. Money splits turn into minefields. An early business deal with Alan Klein leaves control of their 60s catalog in someone else's hands. Imagine writing the songs, watching them change the decade, then learning you don't own the keys to your own past. It's a paper wound that never quite heals, and it shapes every business move they make after. Hold that sound in your head. Now add human weight. Brian Jones, the sonic spark who named the band, loses altitude. Legal trouble, addictions, and the sensation that the group is slipping out of his hands. In 1969, he's out of the band. Weeks later, he's gone, found in his swimming pool. This is the part fans don't put on T-shirts. The room doesn't just get quieter, it changes chemistry. Mick Taylor steps in, and the music soars, but the ghost of what it started as never fully leaves. We're going to sit with this for a second. That same year, 1969, Altamont, a free show meant to crown a triumphant U.S. tour, turns into a tragedy. A person dies in front of the stage. Every myth they'd been selling, the danger, the edge, the outlaw charm, looks different in the camera glare. The industry rethinks security, scale, responsibility. The band keeps moving, but a piece of the innocence, whatever was left, burns off in the exhaust. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, tax law chases the band out of Britain. They become tax exiles. The villa sessions that make a masterpiece also hide another cost: isolation, self-medication, days without clocks. Keith Richards and heroin become a story unto itself. Genius chained to a habit that steals time and friends. You hear it in the records. That glorious loose swing, masking a body count of missed mornings and frayed nerves. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the quiet heartbreaks. Road miles shred relationships. Families bend around the itinerary. Sometimes they break. Ian Stewart, the original Stone who kept the van running and the boogie true, dies in 1985. The band's anchor, mostly invisible to the public, suddenly isn't there to lock the wheels to the road. Mick Taylor leaves in 1974. Ronnie Wood joins and the chemistry rewires again. Every change solves one problem and creates a new one. New color, new jokes, new frictions. And then the backlash lands from inside the tent. By the mid-'80s, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards aren't just a writing team, they're a public argument. Solo albums versus band identity, pop polish versus rock grit. The press calls it a feud. On tape, you hear distance. Dirty Work, 1986, sounds like a band finishing the lap with fumes in the tank. Critics predict the end. Some fans, quietly, agree. We're going to sit with this for a second. Legal knives cut, too. More negotiations, more percentages, more reasons not to pick up the phone. Bill Wyman, the silent spine on bass since the beginning, walks away in the early 90s. It's the kind of departure that makes fans whisper, without him, is it still the same band? There isn't a clean answer. The Stones' myth was always that you could swap faces and keep the feel. Wyman leaving tests that idea. Freeze the frame. Feel the tempo drop once more. Charlie Watts, the band's heartbeat, faces cancer in the 2000s and beats it, quietly, like he played. Years later, in 2021, he passes. For many, that's the moment when time finally stops pretending. If Charlie is the breath, what happens to the lungs? Steve Jordan steps in with respect and power, but the ache remains. This is the part fans don't put on T-shirts. Behind the posters was a price tag. Addiction arrests, health scares, falls from trees, marriages and friendships that couldn't bend enough to survive the schedule. The Stones didn't fade, they detonated, then reassembled, then detonated again, each time losing something and learning how to move without it. The band that taught the world to swagger also learned to count the cost of every step. And here's the quiet turn you might have missed. After near breakups and public doubt, they choose to be a working band again. Not a museum, not a rumor. Steel Wheels, 1989, and a rebuilt touring model pull them from the brink. But the run that began as youthful rebellion, the Brian and the Blues run, the dangerous bar band run, does end. What comes after is something different. A legacy act that still writes, still fights, still fills stadiums, carrying the weight of its own history on every downbeat. If the cost is this high, why keep paying it? Because the songs still move bodies and cities. Because the blueprint they drew became the industry's instruction manual. Because even after loss, the engine still turns over, and the lights still find the stage. Next, the echo and the invite, how the Stones' sound, image, and business model keep shaping music now, and why new generations hear not nostalgia, but permission. Before the Rolling Stones, British rock still wore a neat suit. After them, everyone chased swagger, riffs you can chant, grooves you can move to, a frontman who turns a stage into a sport. Even artists who've never studied the Stones are living in the echo. The way a riff becomes the headline. The way a chorus smiles while the lyric cuts. The way a band can be both a barroom and an empire. Spot the lineage. Listen close. You can hear the Stones' open G DNA in arena rock from Aerosmith to Guns N' Roses. You can hear their ragged but right swing in the Black Crowes and the Strokes. You can hear their glamour side in Bowie, their street sneer in punk. The Clash didn't copy them. They argued with them and took the groove anyway. Modern pop staging, the catwalks, the moving screens, the city in trucks touring model owes a debt to the tongue and lips machine that learned how to turn a tour into a traveling myth. That's not nostalgia, that's infrastructure. One sample you've heard 1,000 times. The drum thunder and minor key dread of Gimme Shelter keep showing up in trailers and TV cues because it carries a weather system inside it. Paint It Black made the sitar and the marching snare part of rock's permanent toolkit. Start Me Up turned a 2-chord vamp into an instruction manual for stadiums. Producers still chase the Exile on Main St. Room sound, bleed, grit, and tape that doesn't apologize. Engineers still crib Glyn Johns' drum picture because it breathes like a living thing. Copy the notes if you want. The trick is the timing. The hi-hat that lifts, the bass that lags a hair, the guitars that chime and shove at once. That's why imitators feel tidy and the Stones feel alive. Culture keeps paying them back. The logo is on shirts from teenagers who weren't alive when the band cut Tattoo You. Murals, documentaries, tribute nights. Whole cities claim a piece of the story. Archival drops and remasters turn old sessions into new headlines. When the band released Hackney Diamonds in 2023, it didn't read as Remember Us. It read as Press Play. The echo isn't just old records getting louder, it's new records syncing with the original frequency. Why now? What a 2025 listener hears that 1969 didn't. Today we hear the feel logic, how space turns into swing. We hear the coalition, blues roots meeting soul keys, Nicky Hopkins, Billy Preston, gospel shouts, Mary Clayton, Memphis horns, country dust, and a jazz drummer who refuses to rush. In the algorithm era, where everything is gridded and bright, their human push-pull hits harder. The Stones prove you can be imperfect and unforgettable. And that imperfection is the hook. Okay, where do you start if you're new? Gateway riff. Satisfaction for the shock, then Jumpin' Jack Flash for the punch. Gateway mood. Gimme Shelter when the sky goes green before a storm. Gateway groove. Tumbling dice to feel the pocket walk. Gateway album. Sticky fingers for the full palette. Soul, country, trouble. Then Exile on Main Saint when you're ready to live inside the sound. Live baptism. Any version of Midnight Rambler that turns a stage into a ghost story. Hear the dynamics, the hush, the snap. They weren't just selling music. They were selling permission. Permission to be loud in public, to be stylish without being safe, to steal like a scholar and give back by playing it better. They taught bands to own their image, their stagecraft, their business, merch, branding, ticketing, film crews, the whole industrial art form of touring. That blueprint is the modern music superstar. Taylor, Beyoncé, U2, Springsteen. Different genres, same skeleton. We're going to sit with this for a second. Legends usually fade into museums. The Stones didn't. They outlived the joke, absorbed the backlash, took the losses, and kept the time feel. That's the legacy. Not that they never fell, but that the groove stood back up. Spot the lineage. Hear the old trick in a new suit. Listen to a current indie single with a one-string hook riding a drum that's a hair late on the backbeat. Listen to a pop-rock chorus that leaves space before it slams. Listen to a vocalist who doesn't belt so much as aim. That's the echo. Stones skipped across decades, ripples still moving. If you were there, you already knew. If you weren't, now you do. Your turn. What was the first Stones song that hit you in the chest? Which era should we deep dive next? Brian's Color, Mick Taylor's Fire, or the Open G Cathedral of the 70s? Drop your pick in the comments. I'll build a pinned playlist from your choices so this history doesn't get erased by the algorithm. This is Rock Lore. Subscribe if you want the receipts behind the myths, and hit the next episode where we chase the blueprint further. From Exile to the bands who tried to bottle that bar band meets cathedral feel, and almost got away with it. Did anyone truly match it? Or is there only ever one engine that swings like this? Click through. We test the copies against the source. The journey doesn't end here, rock warrior. Watch this next.